Hello everyone, welcome to another informative video on White Davy Construction and Farm. Are you among those persons who would like to have their own garden and you've tried many times to grow things, and no matter what method you use, you still fail, and so you tell yourself that you do not have a green thumb? Or maybe you have the desire to plant, but you are afraid to get started because you just think you do not have the green thumb. Do you still have that desire to grow stuff, whether it is flowers or your vegetable garden? In today's video, I am going to be discussing 5 things that if you put them into practice, they will help you to grow a garden effectively, whether you have a green thumb, yes or no. So first, let's discuss what a green thumb is and what you can do if you don't have a green thumb. So having a green thumb simply means having the natural talent to grow something. Now, there are people in life who, whatever field it is, are just a natural at doing it. But then there are others who have the desire to do such things, but for those ones that it don't come naturally, it is something that they will have to learn if they want to be good doing that. And so it is similar when it comes to planting a garden. If you don't have a green thumb, then you're just going to have to spend the time to learn how to grow your stuff effectively. So sometimes it might require a lot more than normal for some people, but it is well worth the effort. So there are 5 things that plants need to grow. It is soil, temperature, moisture, nutrients, and light. Of course, you may say that you have taken care of all these 5 conditions that your plants need, and yet you still fail. So I'm going to be discussing each of these 5 points in detail, and we're going to start off with soil. So different plants like different types of soil. So there are some plants like thyme and rosemary that prefers dry, loose soil, well-drained soil. And there are some plants like your cucumbers or your tomatoes, etc., that require soil that is going to retain moisture. So before you can actually start planting, you need to know what it is that you want to plant, and then you're going to prepare your soil accordingly. Temperature plays a big role in what to plant, when to plant, and where to plant. So for example, if you're planting things like kale or broccoli, which are a cool weather crop, then you can plant these like early spring or fall. And if you're going to be planting them in the summer, then you want to plant them in a shaded or partially sunny area. Now there are also those warm weather crops that you want to plant where they have access to full sun. So plants that are fruit bearing or flowering plant, these require at least 6 to 8 hours of sunlight, and so you want to plant them where they have access to full sunlight. So now we're going to talk about moisture. Some plants really love moisture, other plants not so much. And so if you are planting stuff that loves moisture, you're going to plant these things together. You wouldn't want to be planting, say, thyme with your plants that love water, because if you do that, naturally your thyme is going to drown or die because it is getting too much moisture that it cannot survive. And then if you're planting stuff that does not require a lot of moisture, then you're going to be putting these together. So you have to know what each plant requires. You have to plan ahead what you're going to be doing with your garden so that you can take proper care of your plants where moisture is concerned. And then another problem that moisture play is that, you know, you're anxious to see your plants grow, and so you water it frequently to the point where you're actually overwatering your plants. No, you don't want to be doing that. And so you can test your soil to know if you have sufficient moisture. You just need to stick your finger 2 inches into the soil. If the first top 2 inches of the soil is moist, then you know that below that is going to be moist as well. You do not need to water. If it is dry though, then you know that you definitely need to add some moisture to it. And the next thing you want to consider where moisture is concerned is that you don't want to allow your plants to dry out, or they will suffer. At the same time, there are some plants that can survive for a few days, maybe a week without water. So you have to study your plants, know what they need, so that you can take care of them accordingly. So for example, here behind me where you see I have my kales, and further up I have my Chinese cabbage. These do not require a lot of water. And so what I do, I use 2 methods of watering, because I water by hand or I use my hose to water, because I have some large totes that I catch the rainwater in. So when I'm using water from that, I'm watering by hand. When I'm watering by hand, the rule that I follow is that I just make sure that each of my plant has 1 quart of water, and it depends also on the size of the plant. So, and what it is. For my carrots, I can give it half a quart of water each day. But other plants, I make sure that they have a quart of water. Now, this is my rule. This is not anybody else's rule. But I find that that works pretty well with my plants. And then, sometimes I water once per week. And if I'm using the hose, then I just make sure that I give it a really good watering. Make sure that it soak down. Make sure that my soil get fully wet, because when I'm watering once per week, I have to make sure that there is sufficient water in that soil to maintain that plant for the week. When I'm watering by hand, because I do that maybe 3 or 4 times for the week, then I just give them a quart of water, because I know that they're going to have enough water to take them through. Another reason why your plants may not do well is nutrients. Plants require a lot of nutrients. And so you want to consider the size of the plant. You want to consider whether it is fruit bearing. You want to consider whether it is a nutrient, like a heavy feeder. Some plants require more of a particular type of nutrients than others. So all of these you have to take into consideration when you are going to plant. And so the method that I use is to, over the fall, after I've harvested everything, I like to put 6 inches of mulch over my garden and let that stay there over the winter. And if I don't get to do that, then before I start planting, I like to add like 2 inches of compost, or compost mixed with worm castings, on top of my soil, and that will provide the nutrients that the plant need. Now, if you do not have enough nutrients to add 2 inches, then for the individual plants that you're planting, you want to have a handful of nutrients that you're going to put into the holes before you plant each of these crops. After adding the natural fertilizer to your soil, occasionally your plants might need a bit of a top up. So during the life of the plant, you might need to go back and give them a bit of nutrients. I mentioned this point before, but plants need light. and some plants need more light than others. Like I mentioned before, the flowering plants or the fruit bearing plants require more light, and so you want to ensure that you consider the type of plant you have, the size of the plant you have, because you want to position your plants in your garden for the most benefit where light is concerned. So for example, the plants that you know need a lot of sunlight, you're going to plant them in the areas that you know get the most amount of sunlight. The plants that don't like a lot of light, you can plant those in shaded area. You don't want to plant your bigger plants, your taller plants, where they block light from other plants that requires a lot of light. So you need to consider all of these little points before you actually start your garden. So think about the plant, the type of plant, whether it needs a little or a lot of light. Think about the size of the plant, and then you're going to work with that to design the layout of your garden. Okay, so let's look at the third point that you need to consider when you're going to be planting a garden if you do not have a green thumb. Now here you need to consider whether you're going to be planting from seeds or you're going to be starting with seedlings, because starting with seedlings is more practical if you're just getting into gardening, because a lot of the problems that is associated with starting from seeds, especially if you're going to be starting seeds indoors, would have been eliminated. And not to mention that you have less time to make errors because the plant is already on the way when you are ready to plant it, when you start with seedling. So if you're starting with seeds, one, you need to soak your seeds prior to planting it. You need to think about how deep you're going to plant, you're going to sow your seeds. And the rule of the thumb is that whatever the thickness of the seed, you're going to bury the seed twice that thickness. Your soil that you're planting your seed in needs to be loose, it needs to be rich in nutrients, and so this will allow the plant to push its way up out of the soil. So if you plant your seed into hard soil, oh my, the poor little plant does not have the energy to push itself out of the hard soil. And so you need to consider the type of material that you are starting your seeds into. Now, seeds usually have a certain amount of nutrients stored up in the seeds that will give it the initial nutrients that it needs to grow. But at the same time, you still need to, as soon as you see the plant starts growing its first true leaf, you still need to give it a bit of nutrients, unless at the point in time where you were preparing that soil for sowing your seeds, you have added nutrients at that point in time. Then when the true leaves came, you don't necessarily have to add nutrients until the plant is much bigger. I have touched on this point already, but it is very important to research your plant. So you know what it is that you want to plant, but then you don't really know much about growing that plant. You can talk to a friend who is good at gardening. You can do research online. You can watch videos like these, and whatever method you choose, just make sure that you know the plant that you want to plant, know what nutrients it requires, know what type of soil, know whether it is a fruit bearing or not, know how much moisture it requires, how much nutrients it requires if it is a heavy feeder. So once you fully understand your plant, then it is so much easier for you to take care of that plant. And so don't forget, spend the time. It does not really take a lot of time to do research on the plant that you want to grow, but the result will be well worth it. That I can guarantee you. I have never grown Russian kale before. This is my first time. In fact, I didn't even know what I was getting, because what I bought was a pack of Chinese cabbage seeds, and I get all about 12 seeds in the pack, and most of them were Russian kale. So I didn't know what it was even after it was growing, but I decided not to take it out. Then I found out that it is actually a vegetable. So I had to do research on how to grow Russian kale because I've never grown it before. In fact, I've never grown any type of kale, and yet still, look at how luscious my kales are over there. So spend the time, do the research, you won't regret it. And guys, don't be afraid to talk to your plants. Your plants can actually sense when you love them. It sounds strange, right? But everything in nature is interconnected. One cannot survive without the other. Every part of nature is very vital. They know, the plants know when you love them, when you talk to them, because the truth is, if you love your plants, you're going to take care of them. And you are going to do everything you can to make sure that you are taking care of them the best way possible. So don't love them to death. Spend the time, know your plants, take care of them, show them that you love them, and reap the wonderful result. So the final point on helping you to grow plants if you don't have a green thumb, I'm going to be discussing chemical fertilizer and chemical pesticides. Guys, no. Absolutely not recommended. I mean, why would you want to put chemicals in your body? If you go out and you see these chemicals on the shelf, would you say, oh, those look delicious, let me have a bite out of it, or let me take a drink of it? Absolutely not. So if you are not willing to eat it or drink it, why would you give it to the plants that is going to be producing the food for you to eat and drink? In the first place, when you think about it, when you look out in nature, say you go out in a forest and stuff like that, do you see any form of chemical fertilizer out there? No, you don't. And the only thing that you actually see out there are insects, some animals, and humus. Leaves that fall from the tree, branches that falls from the tree, animal carcasses that stay there and rot, and animal feces, worms and their castings. Those are the only things you see when you go in the forest. You don't see even chemical pesticides out there. None of that is out there. So don't put it on your plants. It's not worth it, because even if they say, okay, this is good to be used on your plants if you're going to be reaping such and such a time in the future, then you can use it such and such a time, and then allow that time span to pass before you eat it. You can never fully get rid of the residue of that chemical, and once it gets in your body, you don't know what damage it's going to do, damage it's going to cause. Even if over time you can get it out of your body, it has already done its damages. So avoid chemical fertilizers and chemical sprays. And guys, don't be tricked by this point. This is something that I got caught with for the first time a few weeks ago, where I was treating my plants organically for spider mites, because usually I would just use my garlic and soap water to control pests, but I realized that the spider mites seem to be a bit resistant to that method, and I didn't have anything on hand, because I would have used like neem oil or stuff like that to help with the spider mites, but I didn't have any in hand, and it would take a good while for me to get it, because the only place that I know where I can get it is online. And so I decided to go to the store and get myself a pesticide. I tried to find one that says organic. I could not find anything that said it is organic, but I found one that said it is made from an active ingredient in a plant. I don't remember the name of the plant, and so I said, okay, I'm gonna go with this one. I bought it and I used it on my crop, and within 4 hours I could see a difference. My plant started, the leaves were getting burnt within 4 hours. Within 4 days, I have a video on it that I can leave a link in the description below. You can check it out. 4 days later, my leaves were just burnt. 6 days later, you could not believe the effect. Some of my plants actually died, especially my favorite callaloo that I was so looking forward to. Thankfully, some of the callaloos were still in the seedling stage and they were grouped together, so some of the spray did not get on a lot of them, and as a result I was able to just take out the ones that died, and the smaller ones that didn't get a lot of the spray survived, so I was able to rescue my callaloo. Now I'm going to show you some of the effects, because I've been going around and taking off some of the leaves because of the damage, but I'm going to show you the effect. Can you see that? These are the least damaged of my plants. I took off the leaves that were badly damaged. If you want to know how bad the damage was, you can just check out that video below. So I don't recommend adding these things in your garden. If it does not use the term organic, even if they say that it is made from organic material, don't use it, because they can add other chemicals to it even though it is made from the main ingredient might be an organic safe material. So I don't recommend them any at all. It's the first time I've used anything that is store-bought on my plants, and I'm never going to be making that mistake ever again. Now maybe some of you have tried stuff like this and have had success, but well, if you're a beginner gardener, maybe you haven't tried that yet. And so my recommendation is, whatever problem you have with pests, you can find something in nature that is going to correct that problem. And so, for example, you know that garlic is a pesticide. You can plant garlic among your crop, and that will help to keep off some pests. There are many plants that are pest repellent, and so you can just interplant them between your crop to help control pests. Like the marigold is a very good one to plant with your tomato and stuff like that. So think about what you're going to be planting, research what type of plant would act best as a pesticide based on the type of pests that affects that type of plant. So do your research and make sure. And then if you don't have these plants available that act as a repellent, you can buy things like neem oil. You can do your garlic with soap, soak in water for 24 hours. Natural pesticides exist for every type of pest that you can think of. So do your research, find them, use them. And guys, that is my final tip on how to grow a garden effectively, even if you do not have a green thumb. Did you find this video informative? Would you like to see more videos like these? If so, why not take a moment to subscribe to my channel, turn on your notification, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment in the section below, and I will get back to you in case you have any questions. I'm also going to leave my email address below so that you can contact me if you have any question. And I hope you have yourself a lovely evening.